The conquered spire hung above the world of Velmira like a frozen white sun, a ring of carved stone and living light that had adjudicated the affairs of 40,000 civilizations for longer than any single species could remember. Inside its highest chamber, the deliberating council of the ascendant conquered had gathered to perform the oldest of its rituals, the pronouncement of an outcome before that outcome had occurred. They did this not out of arrogance, though a human might have called it that. They did it because they were almost never wrong. High Arbiter Cecilin Veith stood at the center of the chamber, its four elongated limbs folded in the posture of certainty, its skin shifting through the pale golds that its people used to convey serene authority. Around it, on tiers of polished obsidian, sat the delegates of the great powers, the crystalline Thurn whose thoughts moved like glaciers, the swarm-minded Ipsi who spoke in choruses, the towering Drelaki whose warships had never known defeat. Above them all, suspended in the air, turned a slow model of a single unremarkable star system. Third planet, blue, small. "The projections are complete," Cecilin Veith said, and its voice carried to every ear without effort, translated 1,000 ways at once. "The species designated human has refused the terms of assimilation. They have refused for the third and final time. Under conquered law, refusal is war, and war has now been declared." A murmur moved through the tiers, not of concern but of anticipation. The delegates had seen this ritual many times. A young species, proud and small, would look up at the machinery of the conquered and, in its fear, mistake defiance for strength. And then the conquered would demonstrate, gently and completely, why the galaxy was ordered the way it was. "Present the forecast," said one of the Thurn, its facets ringing like struck glass. Cecilin Veith gestured, and the model of the human system swelled to fill the chamber. Around the blue planet, faint markers bloomed, the humans' orbital installations, their scattered fleets, their sad little defensive rings. Beside these, in overwhelming numbers, the arriving armada of the conquered appeared. 11,000 vessels under the flag of the Drelaki warcast, enough tonnage to sterilize 100 worlds, drawn from the reserves of a dozen member species. "The conquered expeditionary force has emerged from transit at the edge of the human system," Cecilin Veith said. "By treaty and by precedent, we now issue the prognosis of conflict. Our analysts have run the engagement forward 300 million times, accounting for every human capacity we have been able to observe." The star system dimmed, and numbers flowed across the air like falling snow. "The humans possess a functional interstellar civilization of approximately 14 billion souls," the High Arbiter continued. "They have colonized 29 bodies within 4 systems. Their industrial base is respectable for their age. Their weapons are crude but not primitive. Their courage—" and here the golds of Cecilin Veith's skin flickered with something almost like fondness, the way an elder might speak of a bright and doomed child. "Their courage is, by every measure, extraordinary. It will not be enough." A ripple of quiet agreement. "The prognosis is as follows. Upon commencement of hostilities, the expeditionary force will neutralize human orbital defenses within the first hour. Human fleet elements, being outnumbered 40 to 1, will be destroyed or scattered within the second. By the third hour, the conquered will hold uncontested control of near-planet space, and the human government will have no rational path but capitulation. Our confidence in this outcome exceeds 99.97%. Humanity will fall in hours. It has already, in every meaningful sense, fallen. We gather today merely to record the manner of its passing." The chamber filled with the low harmonics that, among the assembled species, served as applause. It was not cruelty. It was the satisfaction of order confirmed, of the universe behaving as the wise had always known it would. But not every delegate joined the harmony. On the lowest tier, in a seat reserved for the smallest and youngest member states, a single figure sat motionless. It was a Vesson, a species of watchful, gray-feathered observers who had joined the conquered only recently and who were permitted a voice but rarely used it. Its designation was 11 Ashk, and it had spent the last 2 years assigned to the human question. Alone among the council, it had actually gone to the human worlds. It had walked their cities. It had watched them work. 11 Ashk raised a feathered hand. The harmonics faltered. Cecilin Veith turned its long head, and the golds of its skin cooled a fraction, not annoyance, for the High Arbiter was above annoyance, but a kind of patient surprise. "The Vesson observer wishes to speak," Cecilin Veith said. "Speak then, the record is generous." 11 Ashk rose. When it spoke, its voice was thin against the vastness of the chamber, but it did not waver. "I have read the prognosis," it said. "I have read all 300 million iterations, and I wish to enter a concern into the record before the fleet opens fire." "A concern?" One of the Drelaki warlords shifted, armor plates grinding. "The Vesson is concerned for the humans, how tender." "I am not concerned for the humans," 11 Ashk said. "I am concerned for us." That earned a silence sharper than any laughter. "Explain," said Cecilin Veith. 11 Ashk turned to face the suspended model of the blue world. "Your 300 million simulations," it said, "all assume that the humans will fight the war you have designed. They assume the humans will meet your fleet in orbit, trade fire, and lose by attrition. Every iteration measures how long it takes for a smaller force to be ground down by a larger one. And in every iteration, the humans behave the way a conquered species would behave. They defend their orbitals. They protect their fleet. They preserve their forces. They fight to survive." "As any species would," said the Thurn. "No," said 11 Ashk softly. "Not as any species would, as we would. I have watched the humans for 2 years. They do not think about survival the way we do. They think about winning, and those are not the same thing." Cecilin Veith's skin flickered through a complicated sequence. The closest its people came to a frown. "You believe our analysts have erred." "I believe your analysts modeled a war," 11 Ashk said. "The humans will not fight a war. They will fight the shortest possible path to your surrender, and they do not care what it costs them to walk it. I have seen how they solve problems. When a human engineer is given an impossible deadline, they do not ask how to survive it. They ask what single action, taken first and perfectly, makes every other action unnecessary. They call it," the Vesson paused, searching the translation, "they call it the decapitating strike, the one blow that ends the argument before it begins." "They have no such blow available to them," said the Drelaki warlord. "We outnumber them 40 to 1. There is no single action that changes that arithmetic." "There is if they knew you were coming," said 11 Ashk, "long before you knew they knew." For the first time, a genuine unease moved through the lower tiers. "The humans could not have known the transit coordinates of the expeditionary force," Cecilin Veith said. "Those coordinates were sealed under 19 layers of conquered encryption. They were not decided until 40 of their days ago." 40 of their days, 11 Ashk repeated. "High Arbiter, do you know what a human can build in 40 days when they believe their entire species will die if they fail? I do. I have watched them do it. I entered a concern into the record 2 years ago that the humans should be assimilated by negotiation, not by force, precisely because I feared this moment. That concern was noted and dismissed. I am entering it again now, at the last hour, because I would rather be mocked and wrong than silent and right." The chamber had gone very still. Above them the blue world turned, patient and small. Cecilin Veith was quiet for a long moment. Then it did what a wise ruler does when a fool speaks. It gave the fool enough rope to hang the fool's own credibility, so that the matter might be settled cleanly and forever. "Very well," the High Arbiter said. "Let the record show that the Vesson Observer 11 Ashk has entered a formal concern regarding the prognosis of conflict." And let the record further show that we shall test it. We will not fire the opening volley from safety. We will observe the human response in real time, and the observer's concern will be judged against the reality it predicts. Analysts, open the observation channel to the expeditionary force. Let us watch humanity fall, hour by hour, exactly as forecast. The great model of the blue world sharpened, until it seemed the delegates could reach out and touch the tiny fragile ships that guarded it. And 40,000 civilizations settled in to watch a small species die on schedule. They would not have to wait hours. They would not even have to wait 9 light minutes away, in the cold dark at the edge of the human system. The 11,000 ships of the conquered expeditionary force finished their emergence from transit and began, with the unhurried confidence of the never defeated, to form their battle line. And 9 light minutes away from them, on the bridge of a vessel that did not appear on any conquered chart, a young woman named Commander Ada Reyes watched the enemy arrive precisely where she had told her superiors it would, precisely when she had told them, and allowed herself exactly 1 breath of relief before she got to work. She was 29 years old. She had been given command of the entire defense of the human species 4 months earlier, over the objections of nearly every officer senior to her, for one reason. 8 months before that, she had been the only analyst in the Terran Combined Service who had looked at the Conquered's 3 ultimatums and understood what they actually were. Not demands, rehearsals. The Conquered did not negotiate to reach an agreement. It negotiated to gather data, to watch how a species responded to pressure, to map its fears and its reflexes, so that when the war came, the war would already be won in simulation before a single shot was fired. Every human counteroffer had been an answer on a test humanity did not know it was taking. Ada Reyes had realized this while reading transcript number 411 at 3 in the morning, and she had gone very cold, and then she had done something that no one expected. She had started giving the Conquered the answers she wanted them to have. Commander, her sensor officer, a wiry man named Tomas Akafer, kept his voice level, but she could hear the thing underneath it. Full emergence confirmed. 11,240 hulls. They're forming a standard englobement line, exactly like the projections. They think they're bringing 40 times our strength to a fight we can't win. They're right about the numbers, Ada said. She stood at the center of a bridge that was smaller than anyone would have expected for the flagship of a species, because it was not, in fact, the flagship of anything. It was a listening post, a trap tender. Tomas, confirm the clock. Clock confirmed. They're on the timeline. If they hold to Conquered doctrine, they'll spend the next 20 minutes forming up, then advance to engagement range and open the parley window to demand our surrender. Doctrine says they always offer surrender first, gives them the data on how we break. Good, Ada said. That's 20 minutes we don't have to steal. Signal the loom asterisk. Akafer's hands moved. Across the dark, on frequencies the Conquered had never learned to hear because humanity had spent 2 years teaching them to listen only for the sounds it wanted them to hear. A single compressed pulse went out, a pulse that had been prepared for 4 months and rehearsed 900 times. It reached a structure that the Conquered's every scan had cataloged as a derelict mining platform in the system's outer belt. The structure was not a mining platform. Ada Reyes looked at the wall of enemy contacts, 40 times her strength, arrayed with the serene confidence of a power that had already written down how this would end. And she thought, as she often did, of the line her grandmother used to say when someone underestimated her. Let them count the ships. We'll count the minutes. All stationed, she said, and her voice went out to the 17 human vessels and the one thing that was not a vessel that made up the entire force she had to work with. This is Commander Reyes. The enemy has arrived exactly as predicted. In a few minutes, they are going to offer us the chance to surrender, and they are going to expect us to be afraid. Let's not disappoint them. Hold your positions. Keep the fear on our faces and the plan in your hands. We only get to do this once, and once is all we planned for." She let out her breath. "Bring the loom online." To understand what the loom was, one had to understand what Ada Reyes had understood 8 months earlier, alone in a records vault at 3 in the morning. The Conquered fought with certainty. That was its weapon, more than its numbers, more than its ships. Before any war, it ran the conflict forward hundreds of millions of times in simulation, and it only fought the wars it had already won on paper. This meant that the Conquered almost never lost. It also meant something that no conquered species had ever fully grasped, because to grasp it they would have had to imagine losing, and they could not. It meant that the Conquered's certainty was only as good as its information. The simulations were flawless, but a flawless simulation of the wrong reality is worse than no simulation at all, because it produces confidence without truth. If you could control what the Conquered believed it knew, if you could feed its analysts a version of yourself that you designed, then you could make the Conquered run 300 million perfect simulations of a war that would never happen, and walk into the real one holding a hand it had never seen. Humanity did not have 40 times the Conquered ships. It would never have that. So Ada Reyes had stopped trying to win the war of ships. She had decided to win the war of information instead, and she had built an instrument to do it. They called it the loom, because its job was to weave a false picture of humanity and drape it over the eyes of the galaxy. For 2 years, every human transmission the Conquered had intercepted, every fleet movement it had observed, every industrial output it had measured had been shaped by Ada's growing team of analysts and engineers, and eventually by half the Terran combined service, to tell a specific story. The story was this: humanity was proud, brave, technologically stunted, and above all asterisk conventional, a species that would defend its orbitals, protect its fleet, fight a war of attrition, and lose it slowly and nobly. The Conquered's analysts had been fed this human being for 2 years, and they had built their entire prognosis around it, and they had never once suspected that the human they were studying did not exist. Meanwhile, in the dark, in facilities the Conquered had catalogued as mines and refineries and dead relay stations, the real humanity had been building the blow that ended arguments before they began. Now, on Ada Reyes' mark, the loom came online, and the false humanity it had spent 2 years weaving began to do the only thing it had been built to do. It began to unravel on purpose, in exactly the way that would kill the enemy. "Loom is live," HFY reported. "All decoy emitters answering. Commander, the enemy is," he paused, checking. "The enemy is doing exactly what we told them to." On the tactical display, the 11,000 ships of the Conquered completed their englobement and began their stately advance. Their formation was a textbook thing of beauty, a vast hollow sphere designed to trap and crush a defending fleet. And its geometry, every arc of it, every gap, every reinforced node, had been shaped by the Conquered simulations of how humanity would fight. Which meant its geometry had been shaped, at one remove, by Ada Reyes. She had spent 4 months studying that formation, not the ships in it, the asterisk shape of it, because Conquered doctrine was rigid and Conquered confidence was total, and a species that has run the battle 300 million times does not deviate from the formation those simulations told it was optimal. The formation was optimal, against the humanity the Conquered believed it was fighting. Against the humanity that actually existed, the formation was a map. It told Ada exactly where every ship would be, to the second, because the Conquered's own certainty had nailed each vessel to its predicted position like an insect to a board. "Parley window opening," said HFY. "They're hailing us. Standard surrender demand incoming." "Put it on," said Ada. "Let's hear them count the ships." The bridge speakers filled with a voice that was calm, immense, and translated into flawless human speech. The voice of the Drelaki warlord commanding the expeditionary force, a being named Corathan Dur, who had ended 9 civilizations and lost none. "Human vessels," Corathan Dur said. "I am the voice of the conquered expeditionary force. Your defiance is recorded and understood. It is also concluded. You are outnumbered 40 to 1. Your orbital defenses will fall within the hour. Your fleet will be destroyed within the second. I extend to you, as our law requires, the mercy of immediate surrender. Lay down your arms and your species will be assimilated rather than annihilated. You have until my formation reaches engagement range to decide. That is approximately 18 of your minutes. Choose wisely, small ones. This is the only choice you have left." The channel closed. For a moment the bridge was silent. Then Tomas Akafor let out a breath and said, very quietly, 18 minutes. "He thinks he's giving us 18 minutes to be afraid," Ada said. "He's actually giving us 18 minutes to finish loading." She turned to her weapons officer, a young woman named Priya Anand who could not have been more than 25 and who had helped design the thing they were about to fire. "Priya, status of the strike package." "Looms holding the picture," Priya said. Her voice was tight but her hands were steady. "As far as the conquered sensors are concerned, our 17 ships are all clustered around the homeworld in a defensive posture, exactly where their simulations expect. They can't see the Loom's real emitters. They can't see that half our contacts are ghosts, and they absolutely cannot see the mining platform." "Say it properly." Priya almost smiled. "They cannot see that the mining platform in the outer belt is not a mining platform. It's a mass driver, the largest object humanity has ever built, and it has been loaded, aimed, and waiting for 4 months." Here was the thing the conquered had never modeled, because it had never occurred to a conquered species to model it. The conquered fought its wars in orbit, ship against ship, because that was how civilized war was fought. It was measurable, it was legible, it produced a clean surrender. And because humanity had spent 2 years playing the part of a conventional species, the conquered had assumed humanity would fight this way too. Fleet against fleet, above the homeworld, ending in the humans' noble and total defeat. The conquered had brought 11,000 ships to fight humanity's fleet. Humanity had never intended to fight with its fleet. While the Loom wove the picture of a desperate defending navy, humanity had spent 2 years and the labor of half a species building a single weapon in the dark of the outer system. A mass driver on a scale the conquered's own physics said was impractical, because the conquered had never needed to build one, because the conquered had never once in its history been the underdog. The weapon did not fire energy. It could not be jammed or shielded against by any method the conquered understood, because the conquered had never developed defenses against a threat it never faced. It fired matter. A stream of dense, inert, unpowered slugs, each the size of a small moon's worth of compressed rock and metal, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light. And here was the second thing the conquered had never modeled. To fire such a weapon at a fleet, you had to know exactly where the fleet would be. Not now, but at the moment your slugs arrived, minutes into the future. Against a fleet that maneuvered freely, that was impossible. You could never predict where 11,000 ships would be. Unless the fleet had been placed, ship by ship, in a formation dictated by simulations of a war that would never happen. Unless every vessel had been nailed to a predicted point in space by the enemy's own certainty. Unless someone had spent 4 months studying the exact shape that certainty would take. The conquered had, with immense care and total confidence, arranged 11,000 ships into the single most predictable configuration in the history of warfare, and then advanced it along a course that its own doctrine forbade it to alter. Ada Reyes had not built a weapon to hit a moving fleet. She had spent 2 years convincing the fleet to hold still. 16 minutes to their engagement range, Akafor said. "We're not going to use 16 minutes, said Ada. She walked to the tactical display and looked at the vast serene sphere of the enemy, Every ship exactly where it was supposed to be, exactly where 2 years of careful lies had promised it would be. Priya. Firing solution. Solution is locked, Commander. Priya's voice cracked just slightly on the last word. The loom did its job. Their formation matches the predicted geometry to within 40 meters per hull. Every slug has a target. Every target is holding position. If they hold that formation for another 4 minutes, the driver puts a slug through, she swallowed, through 5,300 hulls in the first pass. The englobement is so dense that overpenetration and debris cascade take most of the rest. Their own formation becomes the kill mechanism. They packed themselves too tight to survive a single strike, because they never imagined a strike that could reach all of them at once. The bridge had gone very quiet, 17 ships, 1 weapon, and a wall of enemy vessels that outnumbered them 40 to 1, arranged with perfect confidence into a target that could not miss. Ada Reyes thought again of her grandmother. Let them count the ships, we'll count the minutes. How long from the moment I give the order, she asked, until impact? Priya checked. The driver is 9 light minutes from the enemy on the far arc, but we staggered the loads to account for range. The slugs have been in flight profiles for, she stopped, recalculated, looked up, and something in her face changed because she had just understood the answer to the question, and the answer was the reason they were all still alive to ask it. The first slug impacts 90 seconds after the fire order, Priya said. The last of the primary volley impacts 4 minutes and 10 seconds after. Commander, from the moment you say the word, this war is over in under 5 minutes. Ada Reyes looked at the clock. 15 minutes remained on Corathander's generous offer of surrender. She was not going to need it. 9 light minutes away and 1 tear down from the throne of the galaxy, 11 Ashk the Vesson observer sat forward in its seat, its gray feathers rising, watching the same formation the humans were watching, and feeling the first cold touch of a dread that no one else in the chamber had the eyes to feel. Because the prognosis had said humanity would defend its orbitals. And humanity's orbitals were not doing anything at all. 8 months before the conquered expeditionary force emerged from transit at the edge of the human system, Ada Reyes had been nobody. She had been a mid-grade analyst in the Terran Combined Service, 28 years old, assigned to the least glamorous desk in the least glamorous division, Contact Linguistics and Pattern Review, the unit that read the endless transcripts of humanity's failing negotiations with the conquered and looked for meaning in them. It was tedious work. The negotiations were going nowhere. The conquered issued demands wrapped in the language of mercy. Humanity issued counteroffers wrapped in the language of dignity. Nothing moved. Most of the service had already, privately, concluded that the war was coming and that humanity would lose it, and that the negotiations were a formality. Both sides performed while the fleets loaded their magazines. Ada Reyes had not concluded that. She had noticed something else. She had noticed that the conquered's demands did not make sense as demands. A demand is meant to be met. It asks for a thing, and if the thing is given, the demand is satisfied. But the conquered's demands were not built to be met. Each ultimatum asked for something slightly different in a slightly different way, probing a slightly different part of the human response. The first demanded humanity's fleet dispositions in exchange for a cessation of hostility. The second demanded humanity's industrial data in exchange for autonomy. The third demanded humanity's command structure in exchange for survival. None of them could be satisfied, because satisfying them would have gutted humanity's ability to defend itself, and the conquered surely knew that. So why ask? Ada Reyes had read transcript 411 at 3 in the morning, in a records vault lit only by the glow of the reader, and she had finally understood. The conquered was not negotiating, it was collecting. Every demand was a probe. Every human response, whether humanity complied, refused, delayed, or lied, was a data point. The Conquered was building a model of the human species out of humanity's own reactions to pressure, and it was going to feed that model into its war simulators, and it was going to fight the war it had already won in the model before it ever fired a shot. The negotiations were not a prelude to war. They were the war. The shooting would only be the formality at the end. Ada Reyes had sat in that vault and gone very cold, and then she had thought a thought that would, 8 months later, save 14 billion people. If they're building their model out of our reactions, asterisk, she thought, then we control the model. She had written it up that night, not a warning but a proposal. A short, dense document titled On the Weaponization of Certainty, which argued that humanity could not win a war of ships against the conquered and should stop trying, and should instead win a war of information, and that the way to do it was to stop reacting honestly to the conquered's probes and start reacting asterisk deliberately. To decide in advance what humanity wanted the conquered to believe, and then to make every transmission, every fleet movement, every industrial figure tell that story with perfect consistency. To build a false humanity, a humanity that was conventional, proud, and beatable, and to feed it to the conquered's model until the conquered's certainty was total and totally wrong. The document had gone up the chain and been dismissed by 3 senior officers as the fantasy of an overtired junior analyst. War was won with ships, they said, not with lies. It had reached the desk of Fleet Marshal Corwin Vale, the most senior officer in the Terran Combined Service, a man of 70 who had spent his whole career preparing for a war he had always known humanity would lose. He had read On the Weaponization of Certainty asterisk 3 times. Then he had summoned Ada Reyes to his office, and he had asked her one question. If we do this, he said, if we spend 2 years lying to them with our whole civilization, what's the blow? A lie only matters if it opens a door. What do we put through the door once it's open? And Ada Reyes, 28 years old, had told him. We make them arrange their fleet for us, she said. Their doctrine is rigid. Their certainty is total. If we feed their model the right humanity, their simulations will tell them exactly how to deploy against us, and they'll deploy exactly that way, because they don't deviate from a plan they've run 300 million times. So we make them build the most predictable formation in history. And then we hit that formation with the one weapon that doesn't care about ships or shields or numbers. A mass driver. We throw mountains at the coordinates their own certainty nailed them to. We don't fight the fleet. We make the fleet hold still, and then we make its own shape kill it. Fleet Marshal Vale had been quiet for a long time. Then he had done the thing that made him, in Ada's private estimation, the finest officer humanity ever produced. He had recognized that the plan was better than any plan he could devise, and that the mind that had devised it should run it, and that his own seniority was worth nothing next to being right. I'm 70 years old, he said. I've spent 50 years learning to fight a war we can't win. You've spent 1 night learning to win it. I'm not going to be too proud to hand it to you. He stood, and for the first time in the memory of anyone who served under him, Fleet Marshal Corwin Vale saluted a junior officer. Commander Reyes, the defense of the human species is yours. Tell me what you need. What she needed was 2 years, half the industrial output of the species, absolute operational secrecy, and the willingness of 14 billion people to spend 2 years being lied about to their own enemy. She got all of it. Not easily. There had been resistance, doubt, whole committees that had to be convinced, admirals who had wanted to build more ships instead. But Vale had spent the last capital of his long career forcing the plan through, and Ada Reyes had spent her every waking hour making it work. And slowly, in the dark, humanity had begun to weave the loom. The false humanity grew transmission by transmission. Human diplomats, coached by Ada's team, gave the Conquered's probes exactly the answers that would build a conventional, beatable species in the enemy's model. Human fleet exercises were staged for Conquered sensors, performing doctrine the humans had no intention of using. Human industrial reports were falsified downward, hiding the true output, hiding above all the 4 months of continental power that were being poured into a structure in the outer belt that the conquered scans catalogued, again and again, as an inert mine. And the real humanity, the humanity that had understood, through Ada Reyes, exactly how the conquered made war, built the blow that would end the argument before it began. There were always costs. 3 engineers died in the outer belt, in an assembly accident that could never be reported, because a reported death might make the conquered look twice at the mine. Ada had written their names on a card she kept in her breast pocket, and she had promised herself that, when it was over, if it was over, she would tell the galaxy what they had died building. There were analysts who broke under the strain of maintaining a 2-year lie across an entire civilization, who could not sleep for fear that one wrong transmission would unravel everything. There was Ada herself, who had not slept a full night in 8 months, who carried the weight of 14 billion lives on a plan that had never been tested, that could not be tested, that would either work perfectly the first time or fail completely and forever. And through all of it, she had held to the one principle that made the whole thing possible. The conquered certainty was not a wall to be broken. It was a door to be opened. You did not fight an enemy who had already decided the outcome. You found out what outcome they had decided, and then you made that decision the thing that killed them. Now, on the bridge of a ship that appeared on no chart, 4 months after the mine in the belt had become the largest weapon humanity had ever built, Ada Reyes watched the conquered expeditionary force complete the formation her 2 years of lies had chosen for it, and she thought of Fleet Marshal Vale, who had died 3 weeks ago of an old man's failing heart, who had not lived to see whether the plan he staked his career on would work. She thought of the 3 engineers whose names she carried. She thought of the 14 billion people behind her, who did not yet know whether they would be free in an hour. And she gave the order to bring the loom online, and the last act of the longest deception in human history began. In the conquered chamber, the model of the human system glowed at the center of the tiers, and 40,000 civilizations leaned in to watch a species die on schedule. At first, everything unfolded as the prognosis had promised. The expeditionary force emerged, formed its perfect sphere, and advanced. The voice of the conquered issued the ritual demand for surrender. The humans did not answer, which the analysts had predicted, assigning it a probability of 81%. A defiant silence, a brave, doomed refusal, exactly the human being the conquered had studied for 2 years. Cecilin Veith's skin held its serene golds. The observer's concern is noted, the High Arbiter said, not unkindly, to the small gray figure on the lowest tier. Observe now how the reality confirms the forecast. The humans defy, the formation advances. In 16 minutes it reaches engagement range and the first hour begins. Watch, 11 Ashk. Watch and learn the shape of certainty. 11 Ashk did not answer. It was staring at the display, and its feathers had gone flat against its body, the Vessin posture of fear. High Arbiter, it said, the human orbital defenses, where are they? They are arrayed around the homeworld, as forecast. They are asterisk inert, said 11 Ashk. Look at them. They are not powering up. They are not moving to intercept. A species that will fight for its orbitals brings its orbital weapons to full readiness the moment an armada enters its system. These are idle. High Arbiter, the humans are not preparing to defend their orbitals, because the humans do not intend to fight for their orbitals at all. A ripple of unease moved through the lower tiers, but the Drelaki warlords in the upper seats only rumbled with contempt. Then they intend to fight for nothing, one said. Then they will lose faster than forecast. The observer alarms itself over good news. 11 Ashk turned to face the upper tiers, and for a small gray creature at the bottom of the galaxy, it spoke with a strange and terrible steadiness. You are watching a species that has decided not to fight the war you brought. it said. The question you should be asking is not asterisk why aren't they defending. The question you should be asking is what are they doing instead, because they are doing something. I have watched them for 2 years. A human does not go quiet because it has given up. A human goes quiet because it has already decided how it is going to win, and it is simply waiting for you to finish walking into it. Enough, said Cecil and Veith, and for the first time a note of true sharpness entered the High Arbiter's voice. The observer's imagination exceeds the record. Analysts, reassure the council. What is the probability that the humans possess any capability that threatens the expeditionary force? The analysts, a cluster of the crystalline Thurn, whose facets held the sum of 300 million simulations, rang out their answer in unison. 0.03%, they chimed. There is no configuration of known human capability that threatens the force. We have modeled every weapon, every ship, every industrial output. Humanity cannot harm the fleet. The prognosis holds. There, said Cecil and Veith, and its golds warmed again. You see, small observer, we have modeled every known human capability. Yes, said 11 Ash quietly. Every asterisk known asterisk capability. High Arbiter, who told you what humanity was capable of. The chamber paused. Our observation, said Cecil and Veith, 2 years of it. 2 years of watching what the humans allowed you to watch, said 11 Ashk. 2 years of intercepting the transmissions they chose to send. 2 years of measuring the industrial output they permitted you to measure. High Arbiter, every number in your prognosis came from data the humans provided. You did not spy on humanity. Humanity briefed asterisk you. And you built 300 million perfect simulations on top of it. And you have never once asked whether the human being at the bottom of all that data was the real one. The silence in the chamber changed quality. It became the silence of a great and ancient body noticing, for the first time in a very long time, the floor beneath its feet. That is not possible, said one of the Thurn analysts, but its facets had begun to ring with an uncertain, discordant note. The volume of data is too vast to falsify. To feed us a false humanity for 2 years would require an effort of deception spanning their entire civilization. Every transmission, every movement, every output, coordinated across billions. No species could sustain such a... The analyst stopped, because it had just at last asked the correct question, and the correct question was this. What kind of species could coordinate its entire civilization around a single deception for 2 years without a single failure? And the answer was sitting in the chamber, on the lowest tier, in the shape of a small gray observer who had been trying to tell them for 2 years. A human species could, said 11 Ashk. That is what I have been trying to say. That is the concern I entered into the record. Not that the humans are brave. Not that the humans are clever. That the humans are asterisk patient, asterisk and asterisk coordinated, and that when they decide to win, they will spend everything, every transmission, every lie, every year, on the single blow that ends it. You did not model that human, High Arbiter, because you have never met a species that could think that way. You measured their weapons. You never measured their will. On the display, the perfect sphere of the expeditionary force advanced, serene and doomed. 11,000 ships nailed to the positions that 2 years of human lies had chosen for them. And far out in the dark of the human system, on a structure the conquered had catalogued as a derelict mine, a light began to glow. High Arbiter, said the sensor analyst, and now its crystalline voice held something the chamber had never heard from a Thurn before, alarm. There is an energy signature in the human outer system. It does not match any catalogued installation. It is. The facets rang, checking, rechecking. The magnitude is, we have no reference for it. It exceeds the total energy output of the human fleet by 4 orders of magnitude. High Arbiter, there is a structure in the outer belt that is generating more power than we believe the entire human species could generate. That is the mine, said a Draelaki warlord. The mining platform, we cataloged it. It is inert. It is. It is not inert, said 11 Ashk, rising to its full small height, its feathers flat with terror and its voice cutting across the chamber like the last honest thing anyone would say for a long time. It was never a mine. High Arbiter, that is the blow. That is what they built while you watched the ships. You have to warn the fleet. You have to break the formation. Now, every second it holds that shape, it is a target that cannot be missed. Cecil and Veith stared at the glowing structure. And for the first time in its long tenure as High Arbiter of the Ascendant Conquered, it felt the thing that the Conquered certainty had been built, over 10,000 years, specifically to abolish. It felt doubt. Open a channel to Korath Dur, it said. Order the expeditionary force to break englobement and disperse, immediately. High Arbiter, said the sensor analyst, in a voice like breaking glass. The fleet is 9 light minutes away. Any order we send takes 9 minutes to reach them. The chamber went utterly still. 9 minutes for the warning to cross the dark. And on the human bridge, 9 minutes before the Conquered even knew it needed to be warned, Commander Ada Reyes looked at a firing solution locked to 40-meter precision against 11,000 ships that could not move without violating the doctrine that had brought them here, and gave the order she had spent 2 years and the labor of half her species preparing to give. Fire the loom, she said. It was 14:59 on Korath Dur's generous 15-minute clock. The war had 1 minute left to live. 11 Ashk had not come to the human question by choice. 2 years earlier, when the Conquered first turned its attention to the small blue world and its stubborn, defiant inhabitants, the task of observing them firsthand had fallen to the Vessin, because the Vessin were watchers by nature, and because no more important species had wanted the assignment. The humans were considered a minor problem, a young civilization that would either assimilate quietly or be assimilated forcibly, and either way, a footnote. And so 11 Ashk, a mid-ranked Vessin observer with no great ambitions, had been sent to walk among the humans and file reports, and the reports had been read by no one important and filed and forgotten. But 11 Ashk had done something that no other member of the Conquered had done. It had actually paid attention. It had walked the human cities. It had sat in their markets and their workshops and their places of argument. It had watched how they solved problems, and it had noticed, slowly over 2 years, the thing that terrified it now. Humans did not think about problems the way the Conquered did. When a conquered species faced an obstacle, it measured the obstacle, calculated the resources needed to overcome it, and applied those resources in proportion. This was rational. This was how a civilization that had never been the underdog thought. It always had enough, so it simply spent enough. But humans, 11 Ashk had observed, did not think in proportion. Humans faced an obstacle and asked a different question entirely. What is the single action, taken first and perfectly, that makes this entire obstacle irrelevant? They did not want to overcome the problem. They wanted to make the problem cease to exist. And they were willing to spend absurd, disproportionate, seemingly irrational amounts of effort on preparation in order to make the final action fast and total. 11 Ashk had watched a human engineering team, given an impossible deadline, spend 90% of their time doing nothing that looked like work, arguing, planning, discarding approach after approach, and then execute the actual task in a fraction of the remaining time, perfectly, because they had spent all that apparent idleness finding the one path that could not fail. It had watched human strategists study a game not to play it well, but to find the single move that ended it. It had watched, over and over, the same pattern. Enormous, patient, invisible preparation, followed by a single decisive stroke that looked, to anyone who had not seen the preparation, like impossible luck. And it had understood, with a dread that grew month by month, what this meant for the coming war. The Conquered was going to bring a war of proportion, 11,000 ships, 40 times the human strength, applied in measured, overwhelming force. And the humans were not going to fight a war of proportion. The humans were going to spend 2 years finding the single stroke that ended the war before it began, and they were going to make that stroke fast and total, and the conquered was going to walk into it with perfect confidence, because the conquered's model of humanity did not contain the human that 11 Ashk had actually met. It had filed this in its reports. It had written, in the careful language of a minor observer who knows it will not be believed, the subject species does not appear to conceptualize conflict as an exchange of force over time, but rather as a problem to be solved by a single optimally prepared action. Recommend the prognosis account for the possibility of an asymmetric decisive strike, rather than a conventional attritional defense. The report had been read by a mid-level conquered functionary, marked as speculative and filed. 11 Ashk's warnings did not fit the model, and in the conquered, that which did not fit the model was noise. 2 years later, standing on the lowest tier of the conquered chamber as the model of the human system glowed at the center of the galaxy's attention, 11 Ashk watched everything it had feared come true, exactly, in real time, 9 minutes too late to stop. "You keep saying they are doing something," said one of the swarm-minded Ipsi, its chorus of voices threaded with the first note of real fear. "You keep saying they have a blow. But you cannot tell us what it is. If you truly understood them, observer, you would know their weapon." "I do not need to know the weapon," said 11 Ashk. "I need only to know the shape of their thinking, and I do. They have spent 2 years preparing. That is the tell. A species that spends 2 years preparing for a war it will lose in an afternoon is not preparing to lose. It is preparing to win in a single stroke, and it is spending all that time making the stroke perfect. Somewhere in the human system right now, there is a weapon that has been built and aimed and loaded, and it has been waiting, not for us to arrive, but for us to arrange ourselves into the target it needs. And we have. High Arbiter, look at the formation. Look at how perfect it is. Look at how it has not deviated by a single degree from what our simulation said was optimal. We are so certain of our optimality that we have made ourselves the most predictable object in the galaxy. And a species that thinks the way the humans think does not need to defeat a predictable enemy. It needs only to know where it will be. "The formation is optimal," said a Thurn analyst, but the certainty had drained from its facets. Deviation would reduce our combat effectiveness against the defending fleet by. "There is no defending fleet," said 11 Ashk. "That is what you still do not understand. You are optimizing against an enemy that does not exist. The defending fleet is a picture the humans painted for you. The real war is not in orbit. The real war was won 2 years ago, in a records vault, when a human decided to stop fighting our war and start fighting theirs. Everything since has been us, walking very carefully and very confidently into the exact position they needed us to stand in." Cecil and Veith had listened to all of this in a silence that grew heavier with each word. The High Arbiter of the Ascendant Conquered had adjudicated the affairs of 40,000 civilizations. It had watched 100 species defy the conquered and be broken. It had never, in all that time, entertained the possibility that the conquered's greatest strength, its certainty, its simulations, its perfect foreknowledge of every war before it was fought, might be the very thing an enemy could turn against it. Because to entertain that possibility, one had to imagine being wrong, and the conquered had built its entire civilization over 10,000 years on the premise that it was never wrong. "If what you say is true," Cecil and Veith said slowly, "then our certainty is not a weapon. It is a vulnerability. It is the one thing about us that never changes, and therefore the one thing an enemy can plan around perfectly." "Yes," said 11 Ashk. "That is exactly what it is. That is what I have been trying to tell this council for 2 years. An enemy cannot plan around an enemy who might do anything, but we never do anything. We always do the optimal thing, and the optimal thing is calculable. and a species patient enough to calculate it can stand exactly where we will not be looking and wait for us to arrive. The sensor analyst's crystalline voice cut across the chamber, and now it held pure alarm. High Arbiter, the energy signature in the human outer system, it has released. Whatever it was building toward, it has done it. And the facets rang, checking, rechecking, refusing to believe. There are objects moving through the human system at 11% of light, inert, massive, dozens of them. They are not aimed at the human homeworld. High Arbiter, they are aimed at the asterisk center of our formation. The chamber went utterly, absolutely silent. And in that silence, every delegate of the Ascendant Conquered understood, all at once, that they were about to watch the greatest fleet in 1,000 years die on a schedule set by an enemy who had never once appeared on any chart, and that the warning still crossing the dark toward Corthan Dur would arrive minutes after the mountains did. 11 Ashk lowered its head. It had been right. It took no comfort in it. Somewhere in the human system, a young human it had never met had understood the Conquered better than the Conquered understood itself, and 11,000 crews were about to pay for the difference. "Send the warning anyway," Cecil and Veith said quietly. "It will not arrive in time." "Send it anyway, so the record shows we tried." And the chamber waited, in the terrible stale 9-minute silence, for the light of the truth to cross the dark. The weapon that humanity had spent 2 years building in the dark did not roar. It did not flash. On the human bridge, there was only a deep, subsonic shudder that ran through the deck plates and up through Ada Reyes' boots and into her chest, as the structure in the outer belt released the first of its slugs. The mass driver was 14 kilometers long. It had been assembled ring by ring in the shadow of a dead comet, out of ore mined from bodies the Conquered had watched them mine, believing they were building refineries. Its capacitors held the stored output of 4 months of a continent's worth of power plants. And when it fired, it did not send a beam or a missile. It sent a slug, a dense, cold, unpowered mass of compressed metal the size of a small mountain, and it sent that slug at 11% of the speed of light. Then it fired again, and again, and again. Not a single shot but a stream, a barrage staggered across 4 minutes and calibrated so that every slug, launched from a slightly different angle at a slightly different velocity, would arrive at a different point in the enemy's perfect sphere at the same moment. There was nothing to see from the human bridge. The slugs were dark and cold and moving too fast for the eye. There was only the shudder, over and over, and the tactical display, where a spray of tiny markers detached from the structure in the belt and began their silent journey across 9 light minutes of nothing toward 11,000 ships that had no idea they were already dead. "Volley away," said Priya Anand, and her voice was barely a whisper. "All slugs tracking true, 90 seconds to first impact." Ada Reyes did not sit down. She stood at the center of her small bridge and watched the markers cross the dark, and she thought about the 14 billion human beings behind her who did not know, in this moment, whether they would be alive in an hour. She thought about the analysts who had spent 2 years falsifying their own civilization, transmission by transmission, so that the enemy would build the wrong war. She thought about the engineers who had died in the outer belt, 3 of them, in accidents that could never be reported because a reported death might reveal that the mine was not a mine. She thought about the terrible arithmetic she had done 8 months ago in a records vault, and the colder arithmetic she was about to see confirmed. 40-1, and it would not matter at all. 60 seconds, said Akefar. 9 light minutes away, the warning from the Conquered chamber was still crossing the dark, and would not arrive for another 8 minutes in a lifetime. Corthan Dur, the voice of the Conquered Expeditionary Force, the Draelaki warlord who had ended 9 civilizations and lost none, stood on the bridge of his flagship at the leading edge of the perfect sphere and watched the human homeworld grow in his forward display. His formation was flawless. His confidence was total. In 14 minutes, his ships would reach engagement range. and the humans would either surrender or be destroyed. And either way, the record would show that the conquered certainty had held, as it always held. He did not know about the mass driver. He would not know about it until the moment it killed him. His sensor cast chimed an alert, an energy signature in the outer system, anomalous, large. He turned toward it with mild curiosity. A weapon, perhaps. A last defiant gesture from a species too proud to surrender cleanly. Let them fire. His ships had shields that had turned aside the fury of 100 worlds. Whatever the humans threw, the conquered would absorb it, and the absorbing would be one more line in the record of human futility. Range to anomalous signature, he asked. 9 light minutes, Warlord. Whatever it launched, if it is a projectile, it will take. The sensor cast paused. Warlord, the projectiles are already inbound. They were launched before we detected the signature. They are moving at 11% of light. Time to impact. The sensor cast never finished the sentence. The first slug arrived. It did not target Corathan Dur's flagship. It targeted the ship 4 positions to his flank. A Draelaki dreadnought, the pride of a warcast, its shields raised against energy weapons and rated to survive the point-blank fury of a stellar flare. Shields are fields. They turn aside energy. They deflect charged particles. They have nothing to say to a cold, inert mountain of metal moving at 11% of the speed of light, because the conquered had never in 10,000 years needed to stop such a thing, because the conquered had never been the smaller force, because the conquered had never had to imagine a war it might lose. The slug passed through the dreadnought's shield as if the shield were not there. It passed through the dreadnought as if the dreadnought were not there. It did not explode. It did not need to. At that velocity, the kinetic energy of a mountain is the energy of a small star, and the dreadnought simply ceased, became an expanding cloud of superheated vapor and debris that erupted outward into the densely packed formation around it. And then the second slug arrived, and the third, and the 4,000th. The perfect sphere of the conquered expeditionary force, packed with the confidence of the never-defeated into the single most predictable formation in the history of warfare, became in the span of 4 minutes and 10 seconds the single greatest catastrophe any assembled civilization had ever witnessed. The slugs did not need to hit every ship. They hit 5,300, exactly as Priya Anand had calculated, and each hit turned a warship into a cloud of debris moving at lethal velocity, and each cloud tore into the ship's packed shoulder to shoulder around it, and the debris cascade did what the slugs did not have to. The englobement formation, so dense, so disciplined, so optimal against the humanity that did not exist, became a machine for killing itself. Ship struck ship. Debris shredded shields from behind, where no shield was raised. A formation designed to trap and crush a defending fleet had trapped and crushed only itself. Corathan Dur, voice of the conquered, watched his flawless fleet die around him in the time it took to draw a dozen breaths. He did not have time to feel fear or fury or even surprise. He had time only for one thought, the last thought of a being who had ended 9 civilizations on the strength of the conquered certainty, and it was this: we never imagined they would fight the war we did not bring. Then a slug found his flagship, and the voice of the conquered fell silent forever. 9 light minutes away, the human bridge watched it happen in a display that ran 9 minutes behind reality, which meant that Ada Reyes and her crew watched a fleet that was already dead continue to advance, serene and confident. For the whole 9 minutes it took the light of its destruction to cross the dark and reach them. They watched the perfect sphere hold its shape. They watched Corathan Dur's flagship lead the advance. And then, all at once, in a single silent instant, the display bloomed with impact markers, and 5,300 contacts flared and died, and the debris cascade swept through the rest. And where 11,000 ships had been arrayed in perfect confidence, there was only an expanding cloud of wreckage and a handful of survivors tumbling broken through the dark. The bridge was silent. Priya Anand had her hand over her mouth. Tomas Akafor was staring at the display as if he could not make his eyes believe it. And Ada Reyes stood at the center of it all and watched 40 times her strength become nothing, and felt no triumph. Only the vast, hollow, ringing quiet of a thing she had planned for 2 years finally, terribly, working. "Confirm," she said, and her voice did not sound like her own. Akafor swallowed, checked again. "Confirmed," he said. 11,240 hulls at emergence. Current count," he stopped. 211 survivors, Commander, most of them crippled. The conquered expeditionary force it's gone. It's just gone. We didn't lose a single ship. We didn't fire a single shot at them directly. They flew into the formation their own simulations built, and we counted the minutes," Ada said quietly. She looked at the clock. From the moment she had given the order to fire, 4 minutes and 10 seconds had elapsed to the last impact. The conquered had promised humanity would fall in hours. Humanity had ended the war in less time than it took most of her crew to eat a meal. "Open a channel," Ada said. "All conquered frequencies, wide broadcast. I want the whole galaxy to hear this because I want to only have to say it once." Priya's hands shook as she opened the channel. "You're live, Commander. Everyone's listening. Everyone." Ada Reyes, 29 years old, commander of the defense of the human species, looked into the recording eye and spoke to 40,000 civilizations who had gathered to watch her people die. But her words would take 9 minutes to cross the dark. And in that 9 minutes, the conquered chamber was about to learn what it had done. On the human bridge, in the 9 minutes between the destruction of the conquered fleet and the arrival of its light, no one spoke above a whisper. They had done it. The plan had worked. 2 years of lies, 4 months of building in the dark, a weapon that threw mountains, a formation nailed in place by the enemy's own certainty. All of it had come together in 4 minutes and 10 seconds, exactly as designed. And yet the bridge did not feel like victory. It felt like the moment after a held breath, when the body has not yet decided whether to laugh or to weep. Ada Reyes walked slowly along the tactical display, past the scatter of broken survivors tumbling through the wreckage of the greatest fleet the conquered had assembled in 1,000 years. She had done arithmetic in a records vault 8 months ago, and this was the arithmetic made real. 11,000 crews gone in the time it took to lose an argument. She felt the weight of it. She did not look away from it. She had promised herself that whatever this plan cost, she would not be the kind of commander who won by refusing to see the cost. 211 survivors, Tomas Akafor said quietly. Most of them crippled. "Commander, they can't reach the homeworld. They can't reach anything. They're drifting." "Are they firing?" Ada asked. "Number their Commander, I think they don't understand what happened to them. Their sensors would have shown them the formation, and then nothing. No enemy fleet closed with them. No barrage of energy. Just their own ships coming apart, from the inside of the formation outward. I don't think the survivors even know what killed them." "They will," Ada said. "The whole galaxy's about to know." She turned to Priya Anand. "Priya, I want a full record. Every sensor log, every firing solution, the whole loom architecture, the 2 years of it, not to boast. So that when the conquered comes to us with questions, and they will, we can show them exactly how we did it. I want them to understand it completely. Because a species that understands how it lost is a species that might be talked out of trying again." Priya nodded, still pale. "Commander, can I ask," she stopped, then went on. "The 3 engineers in the belt, the ones who died building the driver, are we going to tell people? Now that it's over?" Ada Reyes touched the card in her breast pocket. 3 names, written in her own hand, carried for 4 months against the day it might be safe to speak them. "Yes," she said. "The first thing I do when we stand down is release their names. They built the thing that saved the species, and they died doing it in secret so the secret would hold. They don't get to stay secret anymore, not from us." She looked at the young weapons officer who had helped design the blow. "You did that, Priya. You and 1,000 others, remember it. When they write this down, and they'll write it down for 10,000 years, remember it wasn't luck, it was people. It was everyone doing their one part perfectly because everyone else was doing theirs. The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Commander," said HFY, "light of the strike is about to reach the conquered chamber. 9 minutes stale. Right about now. Whatever the galaxy thought was going to happen today, they're finding out otherwise right this second." Ada Reyes looked at the blue world behind them, small and unbowed in the dark, where 14 billion people were going about the ordinary business of a day, most of them not knowing how close it had come, most of them not knowing it was over, most of them about to learn that they had woken up conquered and would go to sleep free. She thought about her grandmother, who had said the thing about the ships and the minutes, who had died before any of this, who had raised a granddaughter to look at a wall of impossible odds and count not what she was afraid of but what she could control. She thought about Fleet Marshal Vale, 70 years old, who had saluted a junior officer and handed her the species, and who had died 3 weeks before he could see whether his faith was justified. It was justified, sir, asterisk, she thought. We counted the minutes. We only needed 4. "Priya," she said, "how long from my fire order to the last impact?" 4 minutes and 10 seconds, Commander." "Confirmed." "And the conquered promised the galaxy we'd fall in hours." "They did." Ada Reyes allowed herself, at last, one small, tired, human breath of something that was not quite triumph and not quite grief, but the strange full thing that lives between them. "Then let's go correct the record," she said. "Open the channel, all conquered frequencies, wide broadcast. I want the whole galaxy to hear it because I only want to say it once." And 9 light minutes away, in a chamber at the top of the galaxy, 40,000 civilizations who had gathered to watch a small species die on schedule were, in this exact moment, watching the light of their own certainty come apart in the dark, and bracing, though they did not yet know it, to hear a young human voice tell them precisely why. In the conquered chamber, the warning to Corathandur had left 9 minutes ago and had not yet arrived. And so the great model of the human system still showed the expeditionary force hole, serene, advancing, a light 9 minutes stale, a truth already dead but not yet delivered. Cecil and Veith stood at the center of the tiers, its golds gone thin and cold, waiting. Around it, 40,000 civilizations waited too, though most of them did not yet understand what they were waiting for. Only 11 Ashk understood. The small gray Vesson stood on the lowest tier with its feathers flat against its body, staring at the display, counting down in its head the seconds until the light of the truth would cross the dark. "The warning cannot reach them in time," 11 Ashk said, to no one, to everyone. "Whatever the humans did, they did it before we knew there was anything to warn against. We are about to watch it. We are about to watch it 9 minutes late, and there is nothing anyone in this chamber can do because it has already happened." "You do not know that it has happened at all," said one of the Draelaki warlords, but its voice had lost its contempt. "You know only that there is an energy signature. It may be nothing. It may be a weapon our shields will turn aside as they have turned aside 100 worlds." "Our shields turn aside energy," said the sensor analyst, and its crystalline voice had gone very quiet. "The signature was not energy. The signature was the release of stored energy into mass. Warlord, the humans did not build a weapon that fires light. They built a weapon that throws mountains, and our shields have nothing to say to a mountain." The chamber absorbed this, and in the silence, the light of the truth finished crossing the dark and arrived. The model of the human system changed. It changed all at once, the way the humans on their bridge had watched it change. The perfect sphere of the expeditionary force blooming with 5,300 points of light, then the debris cascade sweeping through the rest, then the whole vast formation coming apart, ship into ship, cloud into cloud, until where 11,000 vessels had been arrayed in the confidence of the never defeated, there was only wreckage and a scatter of broken survivors. No one in the chamber spoke. 40,000 civilization had gathered to watch a small species fall in hours. They had instead watched the greatest fleet the conquered had assembled in 1,000 years annihilate itself in 4 minutes, against an enemy that had not fired a single shot at it directly, that had lost not a single ship, that had simply waited. Waited for the conquered's own certainty to arrange 11,000 vessels into a target that could not be missed, and then thrown mountains through the gap that certainty had left open. Cecil and Veith stared at the wreckage of the expeditionary force. Its skin had gone entirely gray, a color its people did not have a name for, because it was the color of a certainty that had never once, in 10,000 years, been breaking. The prognosis, it said, and its immense voice was barely a whisper, gave this outcome a probability of 0.03%. The prognosis, said Eleven Ash quietly, was built from data the humans gave us. High Arbiter, we did not run 300 million simulations of the war. We ran 300 million simulations of the war the humans wanted us to prepare for, and then we prepared for it perfectly. And they killed us with the war we did not prepare for at all. Our certainty was not our strength. Our certainty was the door they walked through. They knew we would build the optimal formation. They knew we would not deviate from it, because a species that has run the battle 300 million times does not deviate. They did not need to defeat our fleet. They needed only to know exactly where it would be, and we told them. We told them by being exactly what we have always been. And then the human broadcast arrived, 9 minutes stale, and filled the chamber. The face that appeared above the tiers was young, shockingly young by the standards of the ancient beings assembled, a human female of no great age at all. She did not look triumphant. She did not look cruel. She looked tired and steady and utterly certain, and when she spoke, her voice went out to 40,000 civilizations in their own tongues at once. "My name is Ada Reyes," she said. "I command the defense of the human species. A few minutes ago, your council predicted my people would fall in hours. I am speaking to you to correct the record. The war is over. It ended in less time than it will take this message to reach you. Your expeditionary force is destroyed. We did not lose a single ship. We did not fire a single shot at your fleet. Your fleet was destroyed by the shape you chose to put it in, because you were certain you knew how we would fight, and you built your entire war on that certainty, and we spent 2 years making certain you were certain of the wrong thing. I want to be very clear about what happened here, because I do not want to do this again. You did not lose because we outgunned you. You outgunned us 40-1. You lost because you decided the outcome before the fight, and then you fought the outcome instead of the enemy. You told yourselves a story about how weak we were, and we made sure it was a very good story, and you believed it all the way into your grave. Every civilization you have ever conquered, you conquered by being certain. We are the species that learned to feed your certainty poison. So here is the only thing I have to say to the ascendant conquered. We know how you make war now. We know you run the battle before you fight it, and we know that whatever you run, we can make you run the wrong one. Your greatest weapon is your confidence, and your confidence is the one thing in the galaxy we have proven we can take from you. Come back if you like. Bring 100,000 ships. We will simply make certain you bring them to the wrong war again. Or leave us alone and go tell the galaxy what happens to an empire that mistakes a prediction for a fact. I would prefer the second, but we are ready for the first. We have been ready for 2 years. My grandmother used to say when someone underestimated her, let them count the ships. We'll count the minutes. You had hours, we needed 4. The broadcast ended. The chamber was silent for a very long time. Cecil and Veith stood gray and unmoving at the center of the tiers, and slowly, joint by joint, it lowered itself into the posture that its people used only twice in a life, once at birth, and once when confronted with a truth so total it reordered everything that had come before. It was the posture of a mind that had been certain, and was certain no longer, and understood at last what certainty had cost. 10,000 years, the High Arbiter said at last. For 10,000 years we have won our wars before we fought them. We told ourselves it was wisdom. It was only that we had never met an enemy who understood us better than we understood ourselves. It turned its long head slowly to the small gray figure on the lowest tier. You entered a concern into the record 11 Ashk, 2 years ago and again today. The record shows that you were dismissed. Let the record now show the rest. 11 Ashk said nothing. There was no satisfaction in it. It had watched 11,000 crews die. To prove a point it had begged the chamber to accept without proof, and it took no pleasure in being right about the death of thousands. The Vessan observer was correct, Cecil and Veith said to the assembled galaxy in the voice of an empire admitting the unadmittable. We did not model the humans. We modeled a reflection of ourselves and called it the humans. The war is lost, not lost in numbers, lost in the only way that matters. They know how we think. They have proven they can turn our certainty into a weapon and aim it at our own fleet. Any war we bring, they will unmake before it is fought. There is no prognosis that survives an enemy who writes our prognosis for us. Then what do we do? Chimed one of the Thurn analysts, and its facets rang with a note no conquered analyst had ever produced. The sound of a calculating mind that had run out of calculations. Cecil and Veith was quiet for a long moment. Above the tiers, the wreckage of the greatest fleet in 1,000 years turned slowly in the dark, and beyond it, small and blue and utterly unbowed, the human world went on turning as if nothing had happened at all, because to the humans nothing much had. They had counted the minutes. They had won, and they had gone back to their lives. We do the one thing, the High Arbiter said, that we have never in 10,000 years had to do. We treat with them as equals. Not because we have grown wise, because we have finally met a species that made us small and had the mercy to only kill our fleet and not our world when they could have done both. Open a channel to the human commander, to Ada Reyes. Tell her, Cecil and Veith paused, and something like the ghost of its old golds flickered across its gray skin, faint and rueful. Tell her the ascendant conquered has revised its prognosis. Tell her we have concluded that the probability of humanity's fall is 0.03%. And tell her we would very much like to discuss the terms under which they will permit us to survive. 11 Ashk, the small gray observer who had seen it all coming and been believed by no one, looked up at the blue world turning in the dark, and its feathers slowly rose from their flatness, and it felt something it had not expected to feel on the day the galaxy's certainty died. It felt hope, because a galaxy that had just learned it could be wrong was, for the first time in 10,000 years, a galaxy that could learn anything at all. Around the chamber, the delegates of 40,000 civilizations sat in a silence that was slowly, painfully, transforming into thought. The crystalline Thurn, whose analysts had produced 300 million flawless simulations of a war that never happened, rang softly among themselves, and for the first time in their long history, the sound they made was the sound of a mind questioning its own certainty. The swarm-minded Ipsi fell out of their usual chorus and into a scatter of individual, uneasy voices. Even the Draylaki warlords, whose caste had never known defeat, sat with their armor plates still and silent, contemplating a truth that no amount of tonnage could answer, that they had been beaten not by a stronger fleet, but by a species that had understood the shape of their own thinking better than they understood it themselves. The lesson was spreading through the chamber like cold water through cloth, and it was this, that certainty, worshipped long enough, stops being a tool for finding the truth and becomes a wall against seeing it. The conquered had built the finest wall in the history of the galaxy, and a young human had simply walked around it. 9 light minutes away, on a small bridge aboard a ship that appeared on no chart, Commander Ada Reyes watched the conquered's channel open, watched the gray and humbled face of the High Arbiter of the galaxy request, not demand, request, an audience with the species it had come to erase. She read the revised prognosis. 0.03%, the exact number they had given her people's destruction, handed back now as the number for their fall. She almost smiled. She was very tired. "Commander," said Priya Anand, "what do we tell them?" Ada Reyes looked at the wreckage of 40 times her strength, and at the blue world behind her where 14 billion people were, in this exact moment, learning that they had woken up conquered and gone to sleep free. And she thought about her grandmother, and the minutes, and the ships. She thought about Fleet Marshal Vale, who had staked the last capital of a long career on a junior officer's night in a records vault, and who had not lived to see it justified. She thought about 3 names written on a card in her breast pocket, engineers who had died in the dark building the thing that saved the species, and who would, before this day ended, finally be spoken aloud. "Tell them we accept the audience," she said, "and tell them the same thing I've been telling them for 2 years. Bring whatever certainty you like." She turned from the display, toward the world she had saved in the time it takes to lose an argument, and the tiredness in her face gave way at last to something quiet and unbreakable. "We'll be counting the minutes."